All right, so welcome. This is Bee Talks. We do this every second Thursday of the month. We've been doing this for about 29 months now, so we're moving right along. Before we get started, I want to just brief you a little bit about what's coming up for us as a club. We currently have around 650 members, which is quite a jump in membership from a couple of years ago. And because of that, we've been able to offer some really wonderful programs. We have a winter preparation workshop scheduled for this Saturday at 9 a.m. at the CBA Boulder Knoll Bee Yard. That's at 875 Boulder Road in Cheshire, Connecticut. You can, let me see what we got. You can go to our website, ctbees.org, and you can register for the event, get directions and all of that. Doesn't cost anything to come. I encourage you to do that. We have some really interesting hives to show you. We've done some really interesting manipulations of hives during the year, and we'll talk about how we're going to close them up. So that's this Saturday at 9 a.m., excuse me, at the new Boulder CBA Boulder Knoll Bee Yard. So coming up right after that, on September 15th, we're honored to have Dr. Jay Evans from the USDA talk to us about tackling honeybee disease. And he's got some really interesting research that might intrigue you. So I suggest that you tune into that. That again is the 15th. That's 7 days from now. So it's next Thursday. And that's from 6:30 p.m. to 8. And that's via Zoom. So you'll get a Zoom call for that. And Jay Evans is a wonderful speaker. He's a very approachable scientist. He has headed the USDA for Varroa research for about 4 or 5 years now. And he's just a wonderful guy to connect with. And so that would be a good talk for y'all to listen to. All right, so that's sort of the advertisements. Beyond that, we have Bee Talks. We have a schedule in October, beneficial bee habitats and reducing pesticide risks. That might be something that interests you if you're thinking about how the larger ecosphere interferes with your bee's health, which is can be problematic for some people. There's people on this call right here who have had some problems with their All right, so that's about it. And by the way, we have events in November and December, and then we're going to start our bee school again in January. Speaking events, I'm talking about in November, December, and then we're going to start our bee school again in January. And I'm trying to do a pop-up workshop for October, and that would be for an extraction event. I've saved 3 supers from my earlier harvest, and I wanted to find a space. I thought I was going to be able to use the Cheshire Grange, but they haven't gotten back to me. So if anybody knows of a space that we can use where we can bring an extractor and our uncapping gear, we just need electricity and a space where we can fit 30 or 40 people, and we can do a little extraction event where we show people how to use the hot knife and use an extractor the correct way and spin out some frames, put that in a bucket, and we can jar some. It should be a fun event. Maybe we can have some ice cream or something with it. I don't know. Or a bottle of wine, maybe even. So, all right, so that's about it for the events. And so let's start with our bloom calendar, and then we'll get to your questions. I just want to make sure I clarify this. Let me share this screen with you. All right. All right, so you see that? Are you guys looking at that? Somebody just answer yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so I did see, so in my walks, I'm seeing, this is my area, Cheshire, Connecticut. It's about center of the state. your area will be slightly different, but not significantly different, in that these blooms are likely to be in your area. It would be unusual unless you lived right on the beach or something, where you wouldn't have any of these flowers, but I'm sure you have most of them at this point. A clethra, I saw the stalks of a few still out. That's fading. That's been on early in August. That again, that the phenology of that, phenology is a scientific word that means the bloom pattern of that plant will vary from state to state. Down the shore or where it's drier on the eastern part of Connecticut, folks have a lot of clethra down there, and they can actually get a flow from it. We don't have that much in where I am, but it blooms quite regularly. Joe Pye weed I still see out along the trails, and that's been blooming since about the beginning of first few days in August. My Korean BB tree is gone by at this point, so if you have one of them or you're planning on planting one of them, and you've tried to find one at a nursery somewhere, and you plant that thing, in 5 years you'll have a tree like I have, and you'll see your bees working like crazy. Now let's see what we got over here. Let's put this over here. All right, that's good. All right, so jewel weeds out all over the place. Sumac is gone. So we have 3 sumac blooms in Connecticut. We have the early smooth sumac. We have winged, which is the last one that blooms, and that blooms in August here. And then we have 2 in July. The other one in July is staghorn. So smooth comes out just about a week before staghorn comes out. Now you will see those crimson spires on staghorn sumac. So if you're looking at sumac, don't be confused that the flower is long gone. And what you see there is a wonderful crimson spire. Now, if those are within your reach, you can snip them off and make a beautiful tea out of them. I've done that a few times. And it's a Native American drink, and it has flavor and nice color. Arrowleaf, you're not going to probably identify this unless you go on Seek or one of the other apps and use it. That's SEEK. You can download that on your smartphone, any place you have any kind of service. It'll work, and it'll identify plants for you. So if you see a little low growing, bluish purple flower way down near the bottom, way down on the near the soil, blooming, and it's been blooming for about since about August 9th in my area, you will or 7th in my area, you'll see it's in the buckwheat family, and bees work that. Purple loosestrife is still up, by the way, in some areas. I saw little strands of it. Won't be significant at this time, but it's been up there. Dogbane, I didn't check. I should have checked. I think dogbane might have gone by, but it could be up. Rose of Sharon is the white. I'm seeing some white bushes out, and I'm seeing some full bushes of other colors also. So I think that's still around. Tall blue lettuce, they don't really, that's not pollinated by honeybees, but it's just beautiful. And the clematis, the natural clematis, the Virginian type is out, gone by at this point. Knotweed, big flow right now, and depending on your feeling on knotweed, but it is providing your colonies with a sustaining bloom at this point. It's a very reliable bloom, comes out every year. And I can't even remember a year when knotweed fails, much to the chagrin of the folks the ecologists that don't want that stuff around in our country, but it's there, and it puts out a nice nectar flow. And if you just had knotweed for honey, you would get a sort of a dark ruby colored honey. It's absolutely beautiful. And if it's mixed with goldenrod, and goldenrod's a much lighter honey. I never get a single flow of goldenrod. I always get a mixture of goldenrod and knotweed. And this year, the goldenrod has been out since about the 16th, I've noticed in the colonies where I have a lot of colonies, it smells like crazy, so they're working it. And they've got a wonderful flow from that. Bull thistle, just a beautiful plant to look at. Bring that in your, and this is bees, bull thistle and all the thistles used to torture us as kids. I mean, we'd run through the fields and get those little thistles on our socks, and our pants legs, and all that as we ran through. But that is a great pollinator plant. So what else we have there? Moth mullein, forget about that. Russian sage. These are all sort of common stuff that I'm not sure about. And then the mugwort refuses to flower this year. I don't know why. It's set buds and it's there, but I don't see it flowering. So usually what happens this time of year is we'll get early in the morning, we'll get bees working mugwort. They bring back a sort of greenish pollen. So if you see any of that coming in, as you can see green pollen coming in your colony 2 times a year, once this time and one earlier in the year off of maples in the early spring. But that's the only time I ever see green pollen coming in. And that's normally from mugwort. But what'll happen with mugwort, bees will work that first thing in the morning, and then the sun, when the sun starts to heat the goldenrod and the nectary start flowing, the bees shift over. It's kind of amazing to see. They just go right over, and that's the end of it. End of their working the mugwort. All right, that's about it. Now, what has anyone else seen? Is there any contributions? I left the open spaces right here on this, in case anybody has anything else they've seen their bees working.
Hydrangea?
Hydrangea, yeah. The hydrangea is the, I think I have that in here. The hydrangea is the cultivated type, right?
We have PG.
Piju?
PG, I think it's called. They're a tree peony, peony, hydrangea, tree hydrangea.
Okay.
Not a bush, not a shrub.
Yeah, and that'll be a cultivar that bees will work. The regular hydrangea I have around, the sort of more common variety of hydrangea, bees don't seem to be attracted to that at all. But I keep hearing that there is a hydrangea out there that bees will work. And I'm finding that in addition to floral sources, even though all of that rain happened a couple of days back, and I wrote a little blog post on it. Now I'm kind of curious if that will sort of stimulate goldenrod to put out more nectar than it's currently is. It's on like a medium footing at this point. It's not putting out a whole lot of nectar, but it's definitely enough that you can smell it curing in the colonies. So that's a good sign. As long as it keeps it up now for all of August, that would be great.
Bill,
Okay.
I see the honeybees are all over my arugula.
Arugula, yeah, arugula will absolutely that and the other succulent that I have in my garden there. It's just a wonderful attraction to arugula or anything. Is arugula, Ralph, is arugula in the mint family? Or no, must not.
No,
The lettuce?
I'm not sure which family it's in, but the pointy arugula, I have 2 varieties, a round leaf and the pointy. I don't know the Latin name, but
Yeah.
the little yellow flowers and the bees love it.
It's a brassica, Bill.
Oh, it's a brassica. Okay,
Brassica,
all right,
yeah,
thank
it's a
you.
brassica.
Yeah, so that will take care of that. Thank you, Dean. All right, so let's roll with, I'm going to stop this share. And let's get on to talking a little bit about what's going on in your world. Shut this off. Let's see those changes. Okay, cool. All right. You're good?
We're all good.
Alright,
Can I ask
so,
the first question, Bill?
Sure, please.
I, for the very first time ever, had to use mite treatment.
Oh,
And it's my first year using Formic Pro.
all right.
I put it on lunchtime yesterday, went out this morning, and I'd say 20 to 25% of my bees are dead on the doorstep.
On the doorstep. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's still bees living. They've been carted out, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Well, it happens on occasion. So like,
Right.
let's back up a little bit. When did you actually put that on, Dean? What day?
In the sort of mid-afternoon
On yesterday?
yesterday.
What was the temperature?
It was about 76, 77 when I put it in.
Yeah. Yeah, so for that kind of temperature, that is kind of unusual because it doesn't usually, unless you had how did you put it on? Did you put
Two strips, two broods, two strips side by side, just like in the pictures and the videos.
okay, so you put 2 strips in there and you
I
closed it up.
only took the metal wrapper off. I didn't take the wick off. I did a lot of research because I was very, very nervous about it. But it's not something I've had to do since I've been keeping bees.
Okay,
And did you open up the hive?
hold on a second. So yeah, did you follow the rest of the directions, Dean? Did you?
Well, I think so. That's what I'm trying to ask you.
Okay, so
Yes,
the rest of as Ralph is
I removed the entrance reducer. I put in the screen boards because that's what it said to do.
okay, all right. So it sounds like you followed the instructions.
I'm good at following instructions, Bill.
You're good at follow. I figured that. But the only so you know it could be anything, and one thing it can be is that package wasn't formulated right. You know, so it was in date, right? That it was.
Oh, absolutely. Used by is in 2024.
Yeah. So, you know, so I mean, that might be the case. That's unusual for that kind of kill to occur.
On 2 hives too.
Yeah, so I can't really explain that, Dean. I mean,
I'll take that, but I just wanted to make sure I hadn't done something obviously wrong. So
I don't know. As long as you made sure you had plenty of ventilation in there, meaning that you took the entrance reducer off.
Yep.
Now, because I don't, so, and I don't get those kind of kills.
Right. Interesting.
But I have put on Formic Pro years past, not Formic Pro, but Mite quick strips and got big kill from those, where they outgassed really quickly for some reason. All right. So you didn't take the so the substrate has a paper around it, sort of. You left that on. Okay. Can't find you did anything wrong.
Okay.
But would it have made a difference? Would it have been effective if he had gone with 1 strip? I mean, I've got to do Formic Pro. I was planning on putting it in. Now I'm scared. I was going to put him on this weekend, looking at the temperatures and my time, but I'm a little nervous now, and I was contemplating putting just 1 strip across between the 2 brood boxes.
Well, you can do it that way. So put on 1 strip between the brood boxes, then 10 days later, put on another one.
Right. And would that still give you as an effective mite treatment?
Yes.
And less likely what happened to poor Dean?
Yeah, no, that would be fine. I mean,
Okay.
so no, Dean gave him a larger dose up front. Did you have a high mite count or something, Dean, that you were?
I did not have a huge mite count, but
Okay, but you had mites.
I had mites. I've always had mites. I've always had an incredibly low mite count.
Yeah.
I've generally lost a couple of hives every year to mites, even though I've had a low mite count. So I was just like, I'm just going to do it this year. I'm sick of losing hives. I don't trust my mite count. I don't know whether it's me or what it is, but I just decided I'm going to do it essentially prophylactically.
Yeah.
Bill,
So
may
yes.
I ask Dean a question?
Sure
Dean,
you
I used Nod. I used Formic Pro 2 weeks ago, and Nod also recommended that I add an extra deep box to increase the ventilation and add the box with frames, which I did. I used two pads, and the good news is I was very apprehensive like you, but I had no kill. Right now, they seem to be doing fine. So my question to you is, did you also add the extra box?
I did not, because the instructions said only to do that for very strong hives. My hives were fine, but I would not have called them very strong.
Okay, well, mine was moderately strong, but I decided to do that anyway. And I just thought I would just run it by you.
Good tip. I will do that to see if the extra area will help next time.
Right, okay.
My concern was that it was reducing the dose, and I just don't like
it
surface
will,
area.
it will reduce the dose.
Right,
So
but then maybe save the hive or save 25%.
well, I mean, so
Yeah.
but we don't really know the answer why
No,
Dean's got the kind of result he did, because, like for folks that have put on double strips for many, many years.
Bill, could I ask another question about
It doesn't
Formic Pro?
kill like that most of the time, Dean.
I know plenty of people who have done it perfectly successfully.
Yeah.
So
While we're on the subject of Formic Pro, Bill, could I ask another question?
Of course you can, yeah.
The manufacturer recommended treating the entire apiary, and I only have 3 hives, but I only had enough to do 2 pads for 1 hive, and I used 1 pad for my 2 smaller hives. And I did 10 days, and then I'm in the midst of another 10 days. Do you see any problem with that? And it did warrant the use of Formic Pro because I had high mite count.
Yeah, no, so I don't see any problem with it, but you'll be the judge of that because you're gonna have to.
Right, well, you're the experienced one, I can.
No, I'm
far-
saying I don't see any problem with it, but
Okay.
I'm saying, like I can't
Right,
predict what'll happen in your apiary. You'll have to look.
right, no,
At it.
thank you.
Also, it's important to do the follow-up, which is the hive queen right, and
Right,
what is the second mite count?
right.
Yeah.
Post-treatment.
So what
That'll
Ralph
answer
was,
Carol's question.
yes,
Right.
Ralph, so that's a
Thank
very
you.
important point.
Right,
That you make sure anybody that's using Formic Pro this time of year and warmer temperatures, you have to make sure after your treatment cycle is over that colony remains queen right.
right, right.
So even if you're gonna use Formic Pro, well, I mean, I get good queen survival, but if you only have 1 colony, you have to sort of think this thing through. If you lose your queen, what will you do?
Mm,
So be prepared, and that's what beekeeping and animal husbandry is all about, right? You got to be prepared for the worst scenario. So if you have 3 or 4 colonies, definitely not going to lose all 3 queens. And the one where it would be interesting to see if Dean has any queen problems with that colony that he's dealing with. So I don't think he will, but I don't.
Hey, Bill, could you comment on the difference between Formic Pro and Mite Quick Strips?
Well, yeah, so it's just reformulated basically. Formic Pro is a reformulation of the Mite Quick Strip. And if you notice, if you've used them before, you'll notice that they look almost identical, except that the reformulation for Formic Pro was a product shelf life innovation. So what was occurring with Mite Quick Strips is if you didn't use them, you left them in their package, what would happen is they would age out, and then you would notice that there was a sort of brownish liquid that was in that little package where you had to cut it open. And when you did that, you would get this big blast of formic acid, because with Mite Quick Strips, once they're past their age, the substrate that's supposed to hold, or whatever you want to call that vehicle, that's supposed to outgas the formic acid in a regular fashion, gives up all the formic acid to inside the package, and then you get this big what they refer to as a shock treatment for formic acid. So that was the problem with it. So then after a year or something, or 6 months or something, the formic Mite Quick Strip wasn't really recommended for use. And like some of us old timers that wanted to like experiment with that would take pads like that and use them for flash treatment for formic acid. So we sort of like used them anyway, just to get a big drop of mites out of the colony. So Formic Pro came along because of that problem or that issue, and they made a more stable compound to hold the formic acid and release it for a longer period of time. And so that's why you can put it in there for 14 days. With Mite Quick Strips, it was virtually done after 3 days, even though they said to leave it in, I think, for 7. Somebody would have to look that up. I haven't used them in a long time. So Formic Pro is formulated for 2 reasons. Once you have a longer and a more gentle treatment and a longer shelf life, so you can keep that stuff, as Dean was suggesting, up to 2024. All right, so the package he bought, and so it has a long shelf life. So that was good from a product standpoint.
Bill, I just want
Well-
to jump back in for just a sec. I know,
Yeah.
I don't want to have scared people off. I'm not giving up on these hives. I've lost a lot of bees, but the truth is that like maybe I've lost those bees and maybe I will come out with like a very, very low mite count as a result of that.
Yeah.
And that to me is actually a win because I've still got time for the hive to build back up. So I'm not sort of despondent. I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't screwed up.
No, you're good. You're good, Dean. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, the other thing is if you lost a lot of population, you're not going to kill brood. They will pull some brood out, some open brood out if you've killed them. And then you've got hives. If one is weakened and queenless, you can just combine it with another one. Right. So because you've got 3 or 4 hives, right? You said
That's right. I have spares. I'm good.
so you're good in all ways. All right. What do we got here? Peter, what do you got, Pete?
Hey, Bill, I just want to follow up on this discussion and mites.
Sure.
Because if you remember, I had one colony that had a lot of problems. Maybe you don't remember but that was from July. And I just want to share some things with you.
Oh, you got your charts.
Yes. Let me just find the sharing thing.
All right. Jose, I thought I saw you on here.
Yes,
How you doing?
still
Yeah.
under the weather.
Listen, can you do one thing now?
Yeah.
I'm gonna forward you a message from somebody who has problems with the Zoom link. Maybe you
All
can,
right.
huh?
Yes, okay.
All right.
Are you able to see my screen?
I think so. Yeah, I'm just trying
It's
to
up.
do.
It's Randy Oliver's chart.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you 2. I have to send 2 emails to Jose. I just want to get these people
Yep.
on.
Yeah, we can see Randy Oliver's chart.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so this was a couple months ago, and I had brought this up that I had one colony that had a 31 mite count in an alcohol wash. And we went over a little bit how this chart works and everything. I did the Formic Pro for the half treatment, 10 days each. And it did knock them down on the alcohol wash to somewhere, I think it was 14, but very close to that. And then again, we went over a little bit. I want to go through the whole thing again, but this is in red here is an estimation, again, Randy Oliver's model, how many mites you have in your colony if you have that many in an alcohol wash. So anyway, I let them go with a plan to put on another treatment of thymol, which is Apigard, which I did very end of August. And I should say before I put the Apigard on, I did an alcohol wash and it was 71. So even it was higher than Randy's model as far as the growth, but he did have the growth right that would go straight up. So I put on the Apigard and I'm on the first, cycle, which is 2 weeks of Apigard.
Yeah.
And it could go for actually 4 or 6 weeks. But what was very interesting was, if you look at the picture here, when I did the first count, this is 2 days after the Apigard. And I don't know if you could see, but there was just an incredible amount of mites. Can you see that, all the mites?
Are you sharing a different screen or are you?
It's not showing that. Let me just.
I'm only seeing your chart. Maybe other folks are seeing something different. Okay, there you go.
Okay, sorry, I had to change shares. So this was a plastic board or political board, like they call them. Incredible number of drop mites.
Yeah.
So what I did to just see if this is going to go in the right direction, I did take a count, but of course I didn't count all of them. I did on another, using a Photoshop type thing, I broke it up into a grid and I counted some of them, and then I interpolated to how many. So let me just again change screens. So that first count, or after 48 hours, the first count was almost 3,000. You can imagine that, which is like 1,400 a day.
Well, you don't
but-
know. I mean, they might have all dropped the first day, but
Yeah, well, exactly. A lot of them dropped. And then 3 days later, the rate was closer to 1,600. And 2 days later, the rate is a few hundred, 373. And then today, late this afternoon, down to 131 a day. So I don't know if it's too late, whether this hive can be saved, but ApiGuard is doing an incredible job as far as, looking at the sticky board and seeing how many are dropped. And then, kind of going back to the Randy Oliver's thing, and these are 2 week, these are separated by 2 weeks. So I'm hoping that doing at least another 2 weeks of ApiGuard will get it down into a good range. And from what I understand, it's really now where the winter bees are being developed. So I'm hoping it's not too late for this hive, and there'll be enough winter bees developed in September that I could save this still.
yeah. So it's not like you didn't try.
Yeah, exactly. And my other hive, it's funny, the other hive is literally 1.5 feet away, and it's got virtually no problems. It's got a few mites, but
Yeah,
hasn't carried over for whatever reason.
maybe this one's stronger.
Yeah, this one came from a couple packages last year. The other one came from Ted Jones. I had a nuke I bought from him.
Mhm.
So I don't know, maybe the Connecticut bees did better.
Well,
Southern bees.
I'm not sure if those are actually Connecticut bees, but yeah, so, now it's mites, and they reproduce like crazy in that one colony. For some reason, they must have started with a higher mite population. So I suggest that if you actually are going to buy packages of bees, I would suggest wholeheartedly that you consider a oxalic acid spray on them when you get the package before you install them. Or if you want to wait, if you rather vaporize oxalic acid, if you want to wait until you install the colony, you can do that. As soon as the queen's out and starts laying, you can give them a vaporization treatment, which will also kill most of the mites in that colony. So with a package, especially just a few mites in the beginning of the year, can grow into what you see Peter has. So most of you are amateurs at growing mites. Peter's a professional. You can see, although he doesn't want to be. Yeah, so you can get we can get in trouble with mites fairly easy. Now, Peter, of course, the problem is, and that that kind of a mite population is vectoring viruses into the bees. So consider that when you if they fail early December, as soon as the cold snap comes on, then you'll know that it was a viral load. We're going to assume that it was a viral load that killed them, and those mites were actually feeding on bees. Now, the other possibility is that colony robbed out, or mites migrated into that colony in some way. Either that colony is very strong and it robbed out a weaker colony that was full of mites, or a feral colony that was full of mites, and earlier in the year, and you got a big mite population from that. And that's why there's a difference in the colonies you have in the yard. One may have been more aggressive at going after bees that had, or colonies that had mites in them already. We really can't tell, but what we know is that that you're do a roll now after this thing settles down, after your ApiGuard is finished. Do a roll and see what your mite count is. That kind of a mite count won't necessarily kill a colony. Right? So some colonies can tolerate way higher mite loads than other ones can. So let's hope for the best, but I can't imagine you could do anything else, to try to save it. That's what we're doing now. That's our lot as beekeepers, doing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and one other thing, that colony, when I tried to work it, very loud, agitated, and a little bit difficult to work. I went to the next colony, it's totally quiet, easy to work. So,
The one that doesn't have a high mite count.
right.
So, so yeah, so there's ones that were a little bit more, and what I find is that if temperament, lots of times, it's not always true, nothing's always true. And you really can't say anything for sure in beekeeping without getting embarrassed at some point. But for the most part, colonies that are a little bit on the temperamental side are generally really good honey producers, and they forage well. And that could be exactly the case with that colony. Found some place to latch on to a colony that was failing, a Varroa colony or something, brought that mite load back to the colony. That's a very high mite load to bring back, but maybe it happened earlier in the season. All right, what do we got here? Tim is trying to get in. I'll let him in. What do we got for questions? Anything in the chat there? Let me look at the chat. Hold on.
Sean Jeffrey just asked, should I be feeding now, or is there enough of a nectar flow that I might get a second harvest?
Well, you have to figure that out for where you live. So if your colonies are gaining weight at this point, the answer is no, you don't have to feed. Right? They're on pretty much on goldenrod, not wheat at this point. And if you're anywhere near those sources, your colony should be all right. You're not likely to have to feed at this point.
Does the drought that we've had, which has been particularly bad down here on the shoreline area, does that affect the flow as well?
It could. So, but that's something you have to determine, right? So, all beekeeping is observational. I keep saying that, but that means that in your case, you can't anticipate it without looking in the colony. So the thing to do is go in the colony and see if they're putting nectar in cells, what kind of honey they're building. And you can answer that question fairly easily. If you don't want to open your colony and do that, it's difficult to figure out if they're foraging for nectar or not. You can look a little bit, you can look at the landing board, and in every case in my colonies, it's a parade of golden pollen coming in. And the plant that's providing golden pollen at this point in time is goldenrod. And so I assume when I see that in my colonies that like every other bee has pollen on its curriculum, that they're bringing in nectar also.
Okay.
Kevin asked, do you feed with Apigard in place? I know they recommend not to. Do you have any other thoughts?
No, I don't feed with Apigard in place, right? But I don't use Apigard, but I wouldn't feed with Apigard in place. Apigard, so it requires that Apigard requires that bees try to remove it from the colony. So, and don't confuse Apivar with Apigard or there's another thymol that Ralph uses.
Apilife Var.
Apilife Var, right. Both of those are thymol based. They're a little bit different formulation. I don't know why there's two. It doesn't make sense to me, but if Apigard is the one that mostly people that are using thymol will use. So in that case, the bees have to actually move that vapor around in the colony. And one way they do it is they remove the crystals out of that little tin, and they take it in their curbicula and they run down through the comb to get it out of the front entrance. And in that case, they're spreading that fumigant through the colony. So the cleaner bees that are in the colony are actually doing the work of spreading thymol around in the colony. It's different for other fumigants. Formic acid comes out and sublimates out of that pad and you don't have to do anything except put it in there, and the fumes are heavier than air, and they just roll right through the frames, and and you get this long, prolonged fumigation. Oxalic acid, you can either put that in as a liquid or vapor. If you put it on the vapor, it's already a fumigant that's in the colony. And then if you use it as a dribble, you are then just pouring it on the backs of bees, and they're in our current recommendation, you have to mix it with sugar syrup, and then they would lick it off. There are people who have experimented with, but do not, and neither do I, recommend that you try this, of course. And so do not try this. Do not mix your oxalic acid with glycerin. Do not do that. And then put it in your colony, because at that point, the bees won't eat it. So, I mean, I don't know. So and it just hangs around in there and works a little better. So don't do that. Don't try to do that. Please. You didn't hear that from me. Anyway, yeah, so people are experimenting with, well, that's exactly what we need in oxalic acid and glycerin combination. As a slow release pad, the products are out. One is Alum Cap, comes from South America. It's a formulation of oxalic acid and glycerin in a strip that looks like Apivar, that same kind of strip. Put them in your colony, and it slow releases over 6 weeks. Great treatment this time of year. But it's not legal in the United States. But we'll ask Jay Evans, why not? If you come to his talk, that's a question for him. Why haven't you guys gotten off your butt? And they tested it last year, and they weren't overly impressed with it, but they said it was an effective miticide. And here it is, in standard off-the-shelf product, and they still haven't made it available to beekeepers in the United States. And I think it should be available to them.
All right, it looks like Pat has a question. Pat, do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Thank you. Last year I thought I treated, I think, with Apigard around this time of year. I had low mite counts. I went into the winter. In January, the bees were still, to me, okay. I had opened it on a warmer day, looked. Then I had somebody come over and do an oxalic acid treatment. First week of February, I had a total dead out in that month. The guess is maybe they really just did have a high viral load, even though when I tested, they had low counts. So I'm trying to be ahead of the game this year. I still had low mite counts because I had a swarm. So I think, that was sort of self-serving, that they kind of, I guess it helps when that happens, that your mite count can go down. But I did a mite count before I put in the Formic Pro. It was low, very low, but I still treated because this is exactly what seemed to happen last year. So I'm in the process. I'm probably about a week in, and I'm wondering, once I finish Formic Pro, do I treat again? Just
No, well, you have to,
prophylactically?
yeah,
Because this is what I seem to happen last year.
yeah. Well, so what I suggest you do at this point, Pat, is put a drop board underneath those colonies and see what kind of fall you're getting.
I know I haven't had a chance to look. There is a drop board under both of them. I have 2 colonies.
Yeah, well, you have to, that's what you have to do. You have to look
Right.
at this and see what's going on. Like you saw an example of Peter's drop board.
Right.
And so, so that's what you have to do. Make sure that you're getting some efficacious treatment out of that pad you put on there. So yeah, you have to watch that part of it. Now, when you say low, what do you mean by low?
I mean, like down under 3.
Yeah, so it's kind of, so, and you're confident that you did I mean, I'm not suggesting that you didn't, but as a scientist, I always ask about variables. And one thing I ask about a lot is, did people do that roll correctly? Did you use a sugar roll or an alcohol wash?
I did an alcohol.
And you took it from the nurse bees.
Yep.
All right. So, I mean, so it sounds like you did all of that right. Yeah. Okay,
But so depending on what my mite count is, if it comes out very low by the end of the treatment, do I treat again prophylactically or do I just let it be?
no,
Let
you're
it
not
be.
gonna, so you put a formic pro pad in, right? Or two, I'm sorry, did you put
I
one?
did two. I'm doing the 2 at once treatment.
All right. And you did both colonies?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd be really surprised if those drop boards didn't show some mites. And then you can get an idea of what you're killing in that colony. If they're blood red, like Peter's, then you've got a higher mite count than your diagnostic tool led you to believe.
Right. Right.
So, so then that's where you're at. You got to figure that out. Look at that drop board and see, as a matter of fact, look at that drop board, count those mites and get back to us. Cause I want to know, like if what you did, but let's back up a little bit and say that bees die for other reasons too. All right. So, for whatever reasons, they could die from starvation. We had a drought at the end of the year last year. Those bees could have died. Did they die with a lot of honey in the colony?
Yeah, I still had honey after they were dead. They, like I said, we found it. I had a really good honey flow last year, really good honey flow. I did not take anything out of the brood boxes. I only took the supers. The brood boxes were still in good shape. And like I said, once we went in there and found the dead out, there was still honey available.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, hard to explain. But, but get a handle on it with those drop boards.
So at the end, all right, end of the 2 weeks, I see my drop boards. What if I have a low count by the time I'm done? Do I still treat prophylactically with something else?
Well, I don't, yeah, if you have a low mite count when you're done treating. Yeah, you're finished for the year.
Okay.
The only thing you can do at this point after that is to wait until, you're broodless and then give them an oxalic acid treatment.
Right. Okay.
And do that, and that's pretty harmless to the bees.
Right.
So
Okay.
remember, if you're going to do that, you can dribble it in, follow the instructions, which mixing in with, your oxalic acid with glycerin, sugar, and then, put them or vaporize it in, which I don't recommend if you don't, if you're not familiar with vaporization, then you wouldn't do that.
Somebody who knows how to do it came and did it for me. Well, was going to do it last year in the winter, like in February. And then
Oh, yeah,
they
February's a
changed-
little bit too late. So
it was supposed to be in January, and I think the weather was just terrible. We couldn't get together.
right.
So it was like the first week of February, right after January. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
I
that's
had one done
little
this year at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, you got to try to get it. If you're going to do a winter treatment, you got to try to get it right at that point where your colony's broodless. So that could be early November. So again,
Okay.
it takes observation, right? You have to go in,
Okay.
figure out what kind of brood, and then you do your oxalic acid treatment early in the year, earlier in the fall, in the late
Okay.
fall.
Okay.
So the clusters aren't as tight.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Jose next.
Thanks. Bill mentioned earlier Jay Evans, so I just want to give a plug that Dr. Jay Evans is going to be discussing bee diseases, chemical stress, and the tools to combat all these issues. And it's September 15th at 6:30. It's going to be exciting, and I invite everybody to register if you haven't registered yet.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that's a great second reminder, and yeah, Evans is a guy to listen to. And as I mentioned, he's the guy that you have to say to listen. How come we don't have I will if no one else does, but I'd rather have it come from someone else. But I'll ask him. He's the head guy in the USDA. He could make that happen. So I'm going to ask why. Why haven't we gotten that product yet that we can use for an extended release? And that gets me back to Peter's piece. Peter, you can be killing incoming mites. So that's another thing. And in that case, mites that migrate into colonies this time of year don't do much damage, because what their objective is to get onto or into brood. And if you're killing them when they're coming in the front door, you're actually stopping them from vectoring any viruses into your bee. So keep that in mind. From now all through September, October, when brood rearing is ceasing and mites are maybe migrating into your colony from some other source, and you're killing them with an extended release piece like you have on there now with the formic pads, I mean, with the thymol, you're getting your mites as they come in the door, and that's the way to kill them in the fall, in my opinion. And that's why I think we're in dire need of a prolonged, sort of harmless, organic mite killing treatment, or oxalic acid in something, or Formic Pro if you want to use Formic Pro. But see, Formic Pro gets a little cool for Formic Pro to outgas as efficiently as it does around 70 and 80 degrees. So, but with oxalic acid and the extended release, you could put that in. If we had a 6-week treatment for that, like thymol, we could put that in and let it sit in there for 6 weeks and get all those incoming mites. That would be good.
All right. Scott Shane asks, what type of feeder do you recommend, top or board feeders?
Well, if you're gonna, you can put in either kind. But if you have an insulated top, my experience, this is just my experience now, is that your bees will feed out of that into very cold temperatures. And the reason is that the heat from the colony will go up through the SERP and it'll stop. It meets a dispersion barrier for both moisture and heat. And it's not a dispersion barrier for heat. It's an insulated barrier in our value. Keeps the SERP warm. The problem with the top feeder in colder weather is that the SERP gets too cold and the bees want to cluster down below and they won't come up and get it out of the feeder. Then you have to go to a division board feeder if you want to feed it inside the colony, and that stays warmer because it's in amongst the bees. But you can get away with feeding in a top feeder, not so much a jar, but a top feeder. Later in the season, if you put an insulated cover over the top of that extra box you have to put around that feeder.
Anthony asks, any thoughts about making extended release OA pads yourself and using them for 6 weeks?
Illegal.
I was going to say, I advise my client to answer very carefully, Bill.
It's illegal. I would not recommend it, but you'll see lots of literature out there. My very good friend, Randy Oliver out in the West Coast, has gotten in big trouble with his experimentation on that from the USDA and the EPA. And now he puts up strong disclaimers about before you do that. Grease patties, let's just say right away, grease patties will, I don't know why somebody would want to put grease patties on. Is that for mites? We use grease patties for small hive beetles. Was that person wanting to know if you can use them for mites? Grease patties?
Gail? Either speak or type, whichever. Just wondering. Yeah.
Oh, just wondering. Yeah. No, the answer is no. You can't use them for mites.
Okay. And Kevin asked, question for Bill, has he made any changes, modifications to the insulation design for winter?
Well, no, I haven't. And if you can, and I know it's not possible for everybody to come, but if you come to the bee yard this Saturday, I'll show you the sleeve. It's better to see this sleeve in person. And I'll show you the cover. I have found some off-the-shelf covers that I think will work really good. And I'll bring one of them so you don't have to fabricate anything. And as far as sleeves go, I think at this point, there are some wraps that you can put around your colony that will give you a minimum amount of insulation, but it will at least resist enough of that heat loss so that it's the top that will do most of the fighting against the cold for you. So I'll show you all of that this Saturday if you can get to the yard. There's also Bee Smart has I think a good design in their inner cover. They make an insulated inner cover, and I think it's a pretty good design. And it does the job that my homemade insulated covers do. And that you could use with a regular old, you don't need any special equipment for that because it will use your telescoping coverage. You put it right over it. It's basically a substitute inner cover that's made out of a really high density foam. So it's a good product. If you wanted to make your own insulated cover using a regular telescoping cover, you could buy that really expensive but wonderfully high-tech vacuum formed refrigeration stuff they use. It's a 1/2 inch thick and it gives you all kinds of R value. It's a miracle space age product. I can't remember the exact name of it, but I'll bring a piece of that too, so you can see how thin and light it is. And it gives, I think, about R10 or so, or R12, and it's only like a 1/2 inch thick. And so you can put that on inside of a regular telescoping cover and use that. But we'll prep those hives for winter this Saturday, and I haven't changed anything about those. And folks have made them all over the world, and they give me good. I don't hear any. I'm sure people have bad feedback, but they don't. It doesn't get to me. I only get the good stuff, which is nice. I like that. But lots of folks have used that insulated cover and have had great success with it. Or their bees were going to live anyway. I don't know.
Okay, Ian Blake is a newbie. He hasn't gotten bees yet, and he's asking for tips for first timers. I'm going to give him one before Bill gives him one, which is to
Go
say,
ahead.
go to CTBs and look at the bee school.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's what you want to do. You want to go to our bee school. We're going to have the same thing this January. We'll have 4 Saturdays. And we'll cover everything from basic equipment vocabulary. We go through biology. We'll go through bee yard setup. We go through all the diseases at the last session. We saved the bad news for last. And but you'll get a variety of talks, and it's worth your while doing that.
Gail says, I'm on the shore with the drought and robbing. How long to leave the Bee Smart robbing screens on?
Forever. Don't take them off. Like at this point, you can lose a colony in a couple days if it has heavy robbing pressure. So leave those on, and make sure that you're not seeing anything coming in. Like hopefully you're seeing bees go in those entrances on the top of that Bee Smart robber screen, and there's some pollen on them. Maybe you can answer that question now. So we at least could say you're getting something in that colony. And again, if you're in a heavy dearth right now, you got to figure that out, as I mentioned earlier, and get in there and inspect your colony. Make sure that you've got some nectar in. And if you're curious about what that shiny looking stuff is in your frame, give it a good shake. If it falls out on the ground, it's nectar. It stays in, it's not. So yeah, you can leave those robber screens in, but make sure you're actually diagnosing your area correctly. Make sure you're not getting anything at all. And if you get to another few weeks and you're still in that dearth and you're not putting much on, you got to start feeding at that point. Don't let them starve out on you.
Sounds like Gail is already feeding.
Yeah, okay. I didn't see that.
Yep. Any other questions that I missed, folks?
Okay, what's Teresa saying? I'm doing a Forma Pro treatment now. Should I have a robber? Well, robber screens don't affect any of the ventilation because normally they're pretty much screened in. You have to take your entrance reducer out under the robber screen if there is one in there for Forma Pro treatment. So, but then you can put your robber screen right back on. All robber screens, Bee Smart's robber screens and homemade ones and other ones that you'll get will all have a lot of ventilation in the front. They don't cut off ventilation at all. So you can leave it on. Just make sure you put your Forma Pro pad on the correct way. Don't put it across the top bars, not with them. Follow the instructions. And then watch that pad after 10 days. If you're doing just one, after 10 days, when you go in, the pad will be stiff and all of the product will be gone from it. Most of it will be gone. My experience, after 10 days, they're still gassing out. Like when I put a double treatment on, I sometimes leave that on there for a very long time, sometimes 20 days. It depends on whenever I get back there to removing those pads. And after that long a period, I still smell a little bit of formic acid when I'm taking them out.
Scott Shane is saying, I'm starting beekeeping this coming spring. Where do you recommend getting the bees?
Well, the only ones that I recommend getting are I would say go to BeeCommerce and get Leslie Houston's bees. That's the ones that I see. Good luck with them. I've had very clean bees. She gets two she gets a Georgia and Ohio. She gets two kind of groups of bees she brings in.
Yeah, she gets an early and a late.
She gets an early and a late, and then the early ones are from Georgia, of course, and the later ones are from Ohio. And she takes a trip down there and she picks them up herself. She's very conscious about what she provides. It's unfortunate that we even have a packaged bee industry. And she also has queens that she provides also. Now, you can also buy a local nuke. You can start with a nucleus colony, and there are folks that are pretty responsible in providing those. It's just that I don't have one that I could recommend. Although I think, Jose, we could recommend your friend up there, right?
Right. So we've got New England apiaries they're very good in terms of both pricing, and they stand behind their product. If you have issues with your bees and queens, they're actually very good at replacing them. If I recall from last year, they had something like a 2-week guarantee period or something. That's New England apiaries. They're in Southwick, Mass, but they have a strong presence in Connecticut. The other thing I would just mention is that during bee school, we do distribute a document that we call Sources for Beekeepers, and that will have a list of not only sources for you to educate yourselves on beekeeping, but also we will put down the names and numbers of additional vendors if you don't have the ability to get down to where Leslie is or Southwick.
Yes. And again, I think that Jose and I both have experience with Southwick, and I had 5 packages from. They donated some packages from. They were beautiful bees. So if you're gonna go with, and then plus they have plenty of queens to keep you busy, and keep keep Sylvia's comment in mind, because you have to make certain that if you're going to start next year, you have to order your bees early in the year or late December, because they run out. They run out of nucleuses and they run out of packages. So make sure you have taken care of yourself and that you have your bees ordered way ahead of time. Now, for just starting out, I envy you for lots of reasons. It's such an exciting time to start keeping bees. It'll if it catches in any way, you'll overextend yourself and end up with too many colonies to care for. But in the meantime, you'll learn something really incredible about biology, and you'll be introduced to a whole world of fascinating things that you never thought could occur inside of a colony with insects.
MJ Totas asks, is there anyone local who breeds VHB, VSB bees?
Locally, yes. You can get both of those in the state. You can get them from 2 sources. And again, we'll provide those sources at our bee school, but you can also look on our website, I think, has both of them.
No, I don't think so.
We don't put them on there, so Jose?
No, not yet. That's something that we need to do.
Yeah, okay. So Mark Surzak is one. He's Confectionery Arts. You can look him up. And I'm not sure if our friend up in Logan is doing them this year or not. I'm not sure. So I could say Mark for sure. He's got VSH stock. And that's another good thing to consider. Do you want to try to manage your apiary the best way you can in terms of Varroa control, which means that you can start off with a queen that has been bred to try to control Varroa. Now, it doesn't always work, and but we're working slowly towards genetics that are better capable of controlling Varroa. Not sure if I'm going to meet that in my beekeeping lifetime, but they do demonstrate hygienic behavior, and you can test that hygienic behavior in your own apiary. And I'll explain how to do that in one of the workshops. I think that's a great suggestion. And before I forget, I want to mention to the new beekeepers that are starting up this year, don't start with one colony. You have to start with two. And the reason for that will become obvious as you become a beekeeper and you run out of resources for one colony, or you get one colony goes queenless and you only have one colony. If that colony goes queenless, you're out of the bee business unless you can get another queen started up. But if you have two colonies, the likelihood of the same thing happening to both of them is remote, and then you can usually swap resources between the two and recover your beekeeping year that way. So it's best if you start with more than one colony. And VHS, it's a really interesting. There's plenty of queens out there. Don't spend a lot of money for them, but you will get queens from Georgia and Ohio with Ohio packages. Usually the Ohio packages usually have California queens, and you'll get them. They will demonstrate hygienic behavior on their own without being bred for it. Some of them will.
Is waiting until January's workshop too late to get started in the spring?
No, you can start in the spring with January's workshop, but you have to start making preparations now. You can't right now. You start to think about, what do you want? How do you want to keep bees? Do you want to keep them in regular Langstroth boxes like that's sort of a commercial way of keeping bees? Do you want to start them in horizontal hives or top bar hives? Lots of ways to keep bees. And then sort of do some work and study, do some reading. The Beekeeper's Handbook will give you a good start on the basic biology, and then you got to figure out what your mite strategy might be. You cannot be a treatment-free beekeeper, unfortunately, because your bees will eventually die, even if it takes 3 years or 4 years, they will die if you don't do anything about Varroa. But you'll have to try to figure out, on top of this complicated biology you have to learn, we also have a pest that's not in balance with our bee, and then you have to figure out what your Varroa control strategy would be. Now, so what's best to do then is to join CBA, and then, which I'm sure you are part of CBA, but if you're not, join and get yourself a mentor. But during the year, we have these bee talks where we talk about these strategies on trying to keep mites down and dealing with other diseases in the colony and dearth and all of that. So you'll get an education just by attending talks like this, like bee talks, and also you'll get your education will continue after bee school with our guest speakers, but you're getting involved in a community of beekeepers that will support you and continue your education. That's the only way you can learn beekeeping, in my opinion. Otherwise, you're just going to kill a lot of bees before you overwinter any, and it'll be a frustrating and demoralizing experience. So try to make it best for yourself by getting as much instruction as you can. It's a complicated and long learning curve, but it can be done, and there's much joy along the way. Go ahead.
I have a question. How is it possible to maintain a manageable number of hives? So either you as a new beekeeper, and a hobbyist. So I assume there are obviously those who are looking to build large apiaries, but for some of us, it was a hobby. It is a hobby, but it is for anyone who doesn't. I've realized it is time consuming. So I would like to try maintaining a handful of hives But obviously there's the possibility that they swarm, they grow. If you're lucky enough to overwinter, it could reach to a point where it's a not so manageable number. So I'm curious, one, I wouldn't want to buy bees from me. So I can't imagine selling my bees. I mean, for those of us, like if I, as a new beekeeper, the first thing we're told is to make sure we're buying from reputable people who know what they're doing, right? So as hobbyists, as a
Yeah, you didn't know
hobbyist,
what you're doing, just got
Right.
lucky. Is that what you're saying?
right, I did, right? And I'm not even sure they're going to make it through this winter, but now I'm looking at, I went from 2 to 6 to now I'm looking at 4, and now I'm thinking, well, next winter, if I actually can overwinter successfully,
Yeah.
I might get, and I think, how do I unload these hives when I can't imagine anyone wanting to buy these hives from me?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that, Sylvia. I think people would be perfectly.
Oh, you don't sound convincing. But like,
Listen,
are there
okay,
ways
so,
to like
all right,
donate
so
those
let me
hives?
be more direct then. If you want to donate some of those colonies to CVA, that'd be great. You know, we'll take them off your hands.
Really?
But yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll take your colonies. You put them in our bee yard now. But your strategy, but you're bringing up a really important point. You can get overwhelmed very easily. Like I went from, I forgot when, I can't remember. Maybe I actually started my beekeeping career with a top bar hive, and then went to Langstroth, and I turned around one morning and there was 30 Langstroth colonies in my apiary, the first apiary. And then there was 50. And then I was managing 2 other apiaries with, 20 and 30 colonies apiece. So, but that's full time, right? So I'm a full-time beekeeper, and that was way too much work. So I don't think as a backyard beekeeper, you should have more than 5 or 6 colonies. And so the strategy to actually keep it at that level is to run your own, split out your own nucleus colonies during the season. So early spring next year, when you have that wonderful overwintering, which I think you're going to have, you'll have some survivors. And the ones that are strongest, you start breeding, you start drawing brood out of them. Think about a source for a queen, or try to make walkaway splits, whatever you want to do to split your colonies early in the season and then combine them later on. So for instance, if you get to this point and you have 9 or 10 colonies, you can always combine back those nucleus colonies. Even though it'll be difficult for you to pinch a queen and combine colonies, it can be done. And that's what you do to try to keep your apiary footprint down to a manageable level. If you get over 10 colonies as a single person, and you're working too, as I understand it, if you're not working, you're working like hell on your colonies, then it gets to be it gets to be a burden unless you have help.
Yeah, I think that new beekeeper, I just as an interesting point as new beekeepers join on, I don't think I mean, I enjoy beekeeping and I still am doing it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep it within a manageable, but I think it's worth letting any hobbyist know that it is quite a commitment as soon as you start, especially when you're first learning. So, I mean, if you're trying to get an inspection in every week, every 2 weeks, right, and the inspections are taking us longer, you're also a little slower on identifying the symptoms, it is quite a time-consuming hobby. So people should know.
It's also, that's why, that's why you need help. That's why you need, that's why you need all those things. I was trying to make it sound difficult to do so that people would join CVA and get a mentor.
Well, mentors are helpful, and I think, and I completely agree. And I think but at the end of the day, it's your own hive, and you try just putting in mite treatments, testing for mites, all of that stuff. Everyone should know, like, I think there's a responsibility if you want bees.
Oh yeah,
so
it's definitely,
know that it's not a kind of fair weather. And my problem is I'm a fair weather person, so as soon as the weather goes bad, you won't be seeing me inspect those bees, and I look negligent.
And that's not animal husbandry, so animal husbandry means that, well, I mean, that's basically what you're engaged with. You're a farmer, and your livestock is bees. And as any good farmer, you have to practice the appropriate animal husbandry that would be
Right.
that would save that animal's life. I mean, that's what
But
you're.
if I'm lucky next year and I do see I'm gonna have to, you'll be hearing from me to drop off a few hives or
Okay,
at
yeah,
least
no,
some
that,
bees because I
that'll
can't
be fine.
I
Yeah,
can't afford giving you my boxes, but
no, we have plenty of equipment.
but great.
You know, that's not a problem. We have plenty of equipment, and you know, we'll take your best queens off your hands. Make sure,
Wait,
we'll
no,
make sure
no,
that you
no. We
fail
can't do
during
that.
Oh, okay.
That's assuming I have any good queens. It's been a rough season, so we'll see if they make it next year.
Yeah. And then, and you have a mentor, right? You had one.
I've had one. I would say that I've had different experiences, so we can take that offline.
Okay.
But
all right.
I do recommend everyone trying to find a mentor, and I think obviously as someone who's had to go for a year so far, the workshops and especially after they started going in person, they've been great.
Mm-hmm. All right. What else do we got here? We missed some here. I can't afford an electric fence. Looking for a donation source for bear fences. I lost all last year. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to find somebody that gives you an electric fence. Is that what you're asking? Who is that? I've had two. Deborah. I'm not sure. There's ways to put up electric fences that are less costly, but it's the charger that costs money. And so yeah, you can, if you're in an area where bees are attacking your hives, I think you almost have to put an electric fence. I was working with Al Avatabalo, a friend of mine here in Bethlehem, Connecticut. He was my mentor for bees for a long, long time, maybe 7 or 8 years. I worked with him 2 or 3 times a week, and he had a bunch of customers up in that area. And we would go along, and one of them, and they were fairly well heeled and had plenty of money. And so he recommended that one person put like a 6 or an 8 foot fence around the apiary. So they called the contractor, and the contractor came up with this 8 foot fence in there along. And then a bear climbed a tree that had a limb hanging over the fence and dropped in. Arrow parachuted into the beehives and just wrecked them all, ate them all, and then proceeded to climb over the fence and get out. To get in. But bears are pretty tenacious, is my point, and it requires some electricity to keep them away. But they will stay away if you have an electric fence. All right, what else do we have here? Keep an eye on Facebook.
I don't think we have anything else, Bill.
Nothing else? We're done?
If anybody does, speak up, but I think the rest of it is just discussion.
Just discussion. All right, great. All right, we have time for another question. And or if not, we can end this session with a recap of our upcoming events again. And I'll give that. Let me see if I can get that on there. Or if anybody has, in the meantime, if anybody thinks of something they want to ask, this is the time to do it. We've got
Hi, Bill. It's Teresa.
Yes.
Hi. I'm just going back to when you were talking about what the bees were working. And this year, for some reason, well, I'm on the shoreline, so it's been quite a jerk. But I have a lot of moss roses, and I have seen my bees working the moss roses for the first time.
I'm not catching you, Teresa. Your video quality is really low, so I can't. Is anybody else getting it?
Well, it might be the way my setup is. Let me see. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Okay. I was saying that my bees are working moss roses this summer. Well, late fall or late summer, early fall. I have a lot of moss roses.
Moth roses?
MOSS, moss roses. I've never seen them work them before. And I don't know if it's because of the dearth that we're in on the shoreline, but they're all over it. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. What is it? Anybody know what that is?
It looks like a type of purslane, Bill.
Oh, a purslane. Oh, okay.
I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, but it looks low growing like that.
Yeah.
It is. It's slow growing. It is like a purslane. It might be in the purslane family. I'm not sure, but it has quite a significant flower on it.
Yellow.
So they're
Yellow?
different colors. They're yellow. They're fuchsia. They're white. They're orange. So they're all over. Yeah, there you go.
Very pretty.
Yes.
Are they? Oh, this is a cultivar.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Right.
Yeah, it's not a purslane.
Okay. Because I
No,
thought,
yeah.
I thought for a minute there you might have been talking about bird's foot trefoil, which is also still out, and the bees are working it. Yeah. All right. That's cool. Yeah. I don't. So
Anyway, just an observation. I was surprised by it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I've
thanks.
had my 3 seasons, and I've always planted moss roses. I've never seen them on them before until this year. So
Well, about 6 years ago, the bees works. They worked forsythia. Now, I know a beekeeper that's been beekeeping for about 80 years in Connecticut, and or about 70 years now, not 80, 70. And he noticed at the same time I did. And I said, did you see bees working forsythia this year? And he said, yes, early in the spring, the first time I've ever seen bees work forsythia. So there it is. I mean, like something happened in the environment that year, about 6 years ago, when in the spring, when forsythia, because it was a dry plant. I mean, it might have some pollen in it, I'm not sure. And the bees worked forsythia that year. So, I get it. Bees do work blooms that you never see them on occasionally. So yeah, and it's really interesting to observe. So Teresa brings up this point that I want you to all sort of think about, in that there's lots of different windows you can look out as a beekeeper, and you can stay focused as a hive-centric person, where you're always looking at your Varroa counts and worrying about disease and all that. And that's important to do on the animal husbandry side, but that can't be your only orientation towards your hobby. I suggest that you consider everything that beekeeping has to offer, and especially the bloom part. Like Teresa's mentioning, she's never seen bees on that moss rose before, and I've never seen bees on it either. But that's the observation part, the actual looking at bees coming in and out of your colony, and the foraging part of it, and to look around in your area and try to find your bees on things like linden trees and black locusts when they come out, and, these sources of nectar and pollen that make bees hum when they're on the trees. That's a beautiful part of beekeeping, and your thoughts can, if you're lucky enough, you'll migrate over to thinking more or less about your bees as tied to the ecosphere than separate from it, because everything that occurs outside the colony in terms of bloom, your whole bloomscape is what I refer to it as. That whole bloomscape has everything to do with how the biology in your colony works, because they're hand in hand. Bees have evolved with natural angiosperms, or flowering plants, and they react biologically to those plants that are in your immediate area. So, and that's a real rewarding part of beekeeping, because it brings you out into the larger world, and it keeps you connected with the natural world in lots of ways. And that's the grand payoff for beekeeping. And unfortunately, we have to deal with pests and Varroa and all that. But the other part is equally as exciting, And I just, for those of you that are starting this adventure, or for those of you who've been for a while, and you find yourself not looking around at your bloomscape, just try it with a couple of plants. And the one you can do right now is jewelweed. And if you want to see an incredible dance of bees pollinating a plant, look at jewelweed, and it's all over the roadsides, especially in wet areas. If you're walking along a trail or anything, jewelweed is there, and you can see pollinators, all different sized bumblebees and honeybees, losing themselves inside of a jewelweed plant. And very interesting thing to observe this time of year. So stay on the bright side of things, or at least balance your observation when you're dealing with your colonies. Go look for the good stuff too. All right, so you heard about Jay Evans coming up. Go to the website, ctps.org. If you're not a member and you're on this call, if you please would consider being a member, we would appreciate it. We can use your support. And with that, is there anything else we need to say here? Is Jose still here? Jose, do we need to say anything else at this point?
No, I certainly won't.
Shame.
All right, I get it. All right, so Dean, I want you to thank you so much for being our technical guy tonight. And,
Anytime, Bill. Always happy to help.
yeah, no problem. And we will see you Saturday, I hope. If not, I will see you at the J Talk Club.